Hey yo my fellow Rumble Maniacs, it's Mr. Rumble Roses here. And today, I wanted to make another vlog type of video, because I want to talk about the recent release of Duke Nukem 3D World Tour. Especially since I finished the game up just recently. I've had the time to experience what the game had to offer, and I've managed to sort of go through the good and the bad sides of Duke 3D World Tour. Now before I talk about it, I do want to point out that this was from my experience from the PC version of the game. There are a couple of other versions made, like for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Anyway, let's get started. So, when Duke Nukem 3D World Tour was first announced, there was a mixed reaction for it. Some of which I found to be mostly stupid reasons because of things like, the new voice sucks. It's not the same as back in the original game. To even, oh great, another re-release of Duke Nukem 3D once again. Now, when it came to those who was going on about Duke Nukem 3D getting another re-release again, I can understand that whole situation. I mean, we've had about 3 re-releases of Duke Nukem 3D. The first one was Duke Nukem 3D Megaton Edition, where it had the Duke Nukem 3D Atomic Edition game with its 4 episodes. And we had the expansions as well. The majority of those expansions, I never really played before until Duke 3D Megaton came out. And despite the bugs, and the developers behind it, pretty much giving up on it and not making it 100% bug-free and stuff, I did enjoy the thing at least. Duke Caribbean, Life's a Beach, was my favorite expansion out of the 3. Then 3D Realms released a huge collection of classic old games they made back in the day, as part of their 3D Realms Anthology collection. And now, we have Duke Nukem 3D, 20th Anniversary, World Tour. I own all 3 of these things. Hell, I even have the original Duke Nukem 3D game, where it has the original 3 episodes, instead of there being 4. Now I get it. The Duke Nukem franchise isn't really going places right now. The last newish Duke Nukem game we've gotten back then was Duke Nukem Forever, although people pretty much decided to shit on that game like fucking crazy. Now when it comes to me, I'm someone who, even though I'll play the games of today, I often like to still play the classics from the good old days. Games like Duke Nukem 3D, of course. To even the likes of Doom, Wolfenstein. Even games like Super Mario Bros., Sonic the Hedgehog, and even GoldenEye. Things like that. And it's cool to often see classic games making some kind to come back to the new year. Like Tour Rock for example. Tour Rock, Dinosaur Hunter, was one game that I did like back on the N64 days. Although I've never gotten the chance to fully experience it, let alone beat it. But I thought it was cool that it was brought back, so I could relive the experience again and then some. I will say though, that re-releasing a game again, and again, and again, it can be annoying to some. Anyway, now that I got that out of my system, let's talk about Duke Nukem 3D World Tour. I enjoyed the new 5th episode. And I really liked the new music that was made by the original composers behind the Duke 3D game. The 5th episode boss was a bit of a letdown to say the least. Because the new boss was basically just the Cycloid Emperor, but colored differently, and had a couple of new attacks. I did think though, that the new Firefly alien was a nice little touch on things. And I did like the new weapon that was added as well. The true 3D render or polymer lighting, whatever you want to call it, was a nice little touch. Although sometimes there can be moments where it might cause your game to lag like crazy, with frame rate dropping. And maybe even end up crashing the game. Maybe. That's pretty much the reason behind why I didn't use it during my co-op playthrough of the game. Although, I did use it for brief little moments to see how some things looked. I did like how we could go through all 5 episodes of Duke 3D World Tour, as one long episode kinda thing. It reminded me of Duke Nukem 64, to be able to finish up one episode, then move on to the next without losing your stuff. I liked how they added Duke bots to play Duke matches with on the levels of the game, and I especially like how they kinda toned them down a bit, instead of them being too OP'd. I did like how when one person gets a key in co-op mode, then it'll be in the key slot for everyone else that's playing. I liked the little developer commentary that they added in. And finally, I did like how they added in the ability to rewind time in single player mode, if you somehow died. So, those are the pros, as they say, that I had for World Tour. But now it's time for the cons that I have regarding the game. So, first thing would have to be about the true 3D render for the game. I'm not saying that it was a bad thing to add in, but it can cause some problems of lag. Not to mention that some user maps can only be played if you have true 3D render on. Because if you don't have it on for some of the user maps, the game will crash. So you gotta be able to know what maps need that stuff on, and what maps you can perhaps handle with that stuff on. Another possible issue regarding the true 3D render is that I believe it can cause some issues when in a multiplayer game. Some people seem to have reported crashes when trying to play with the true 3D render on during an online game. Speaking of online, the workshop maps, they don't download when you try to join a lobby that's hosting a user map that you don't have. It reminds me of Left 4 Dead 2, where you had to subscribe to the map via the workshop in order to download it. When you're in a lobby, you can't chat via typing, but you can voice chat on there, and even when in the game as well. I guess the voice chat stuff is a little extra plus in my book. But it is nice to have the best of both worlds, in terms of typing and voice chatting both in a lobby and in the game. As I mentioned before, the boss on the 5th episode was a bit of a letdown. In my opinion, they could have introduced something new, in the form of a new boss. These days, there are loads of sprites made for, like say, the aliens in Duke Nukem 3D, to even the demons from Doom. When I saw the Cycloid Emperor, and how it looked and functioned, it reminded me of a Doom mod, called Complex Doom. It was a mod where it took some of the demons and made variants of them, to make them be much tougher and have new attacks to dish out as well. They at least had some new looks to them, with their new attacks as well. I didn't mind having to fight the aliens again, because it is Duke Nukem 3D after all. But I think that it would have been a nice touch, to throw in some surprises along the way. Like some new aliens, as well as a new boss to deal with. Right now, the game is set at $20, which is a bit pricey compared to how much Megaton Edition was, which that game was $10, and you even got the expansions with a main game for that. I took to Twitter at one point, and I told Randy Pitch for this myself. And this next thing goes into my cons list of the game. But the expansions weren't added onto World Tour, which sucks, because of how they removed Duke 3D Megaton Edition off of the shelves like Steam and the online game store, things like the PlayStation Network. And also, the expansion maps were fixed up and made multiplayer friendly. Both co-op and Duke match modes. Even bugs and texture issues were fixed as well. Because originally, the expansions had issues with them. Especially Nuclear Winter. Good God, that was probably the most problematic one of them all. Hell, you couldn't even really play the game in co-op mode. Because the majority of the levels didn't have co-op spawns in them. It was only for the first and last level. The last thing for my list of cons involving the game would have to be no mod support. If you've seen a good portion of my videos I've done, then you would know how much of a mod gamer I am. I like to play mods for games, like Doom. To even Duke Nukem 3D of course. Whether it be gameplay changes, like how Duke Plus is, to even stuff that has new maps, monsters, or even new weapons to play with. I like to have the ability to play games in different ways pretty much. Back on Duke 3D Megaton. That was the one way I played most mods that weren't restricted to only working with eDuke 32. And I was a bit bummed out that they didn't add mod support for the game. And believe me when I say, I've tried to play mods on World Tour. They didn't work. Now when it came to the sounds in the game, unlike most people, I didn't have a problem with the sounds. For those who somehow do though, there's ways to change the sounds in the game. Because in the files for World Tour, there's a folder for all the sounds used. All you have to do is make sure that the new sounds are the same format as the originals are. In this case, the sounds for a World Tour are in OGG format. I don't know what OGG means, but that's the formatting that the sounds are. And of course you gotta rename the new sounds to the same name as the sounds you are replacing. Then you're good to go basically. Overall though, it's a decent thing, despite it being another re-release of Duke Nukem 3D. And I get that. But, since Gearbox owns Duke Nukem's IP now, and since Megaton wasn't under their name when it was released, it was no surprise really, that they removed it. That's just how companies are mainly. If there's something that they own out there, and it's not under their name or anything like that, they're most likely gonna take action towards it. Anyway, hopefully Duke Nukem 3D World Tour will get updates added in, and things get fixed. And hopefully things will improve over time to make it perhaps a better port of Duke Nukem 3D versus how Megton was. But only time will tell. If you're a fan of Duke Nukem 3D, and you'd like to get your hands on it, especially if you weren't able to get your hands on the Megaton edition, then get this game. If you want to have the ability to play Duke Nukem 3D online, then get this. The new episode was pretty good, and it's worth trying out. But yeah, this is just my take on how I felt about Duke Nukem 3D World Tour. From the good and the bad side of it. I just figured that I would share my thoughts and stuff on it, being someone who's played the game for so long, and even grew up with it as well. So, that pretty much does it for this video. So as always, thanks for watching.